and I am the program director. And so the way this is going to run is the first 30, 40 minutes or so, I'm going to walk the panelists through some questions that either I have prepared or some people have sent to me. And then the last 20 minutes or so, we'll open up questions from the audience. You can put your questions in the chat or the Q&A section, and we will distribute that to our alumni. So if there's anything that I missed or didn't cover that you're wondering, hold on till the end and we will get to your questions. We're gonna cover a lot of different topics. We wanna find out what are our panelists doing, how are they doing it, how did they get there, any advice they have, tips and tricks. But if you have any questions, it can be about applying to our program or questions about the job placement aspect after the program, questions about interviewing for a data science role, program experience, all of that good stuff. These are questions that feel free to ask our panelists. Yeah, and if, as a reminder, we're going to try and get through all the questions and everybody's questions by the end of this session. If we don't get to your question, or if you have any other additional questions, you can always reach us at admissions@thedataincubator.com, and we're happy to get back to you. Then I also just want to remind you guys that our application is currently open for our spring cohort. Our spring cohort is going to run from April 5th to May 28th. An application for early admissions is open right now. So you can go to our website and you can apply. The early admissions closes on January 15th, and then you'll miss out on that early admissions deadline. And then our regular admissions, I believe, closes, I want to say 2/12. So I'll go over those dates at the end, but just to have a heads up as far as that. All right, well, you guys aren't here to hear from me. So let's get in and let me introduce our panelists for you. First person that I have on my list is our alumni, Isaac. He is located in New York, and he did his undergraduate degree in physics and did 4 years of graduate research studying optical frequency at the National Institute of Technology before leaving with a master's in electrical engineering. He participated in the Data Incubator in the summer of 2019, and he started working at Intellect Design in September of 2019. He's currently focused on NLP, and he's interested in unsupervised and semi-supervised and transfer machine learning approaches. So welcome, Isaac. Next up, we have Yuri Bowman. Yury is a deep learning team lead working on a recommender systems for the merchandising/advertising team at eBay in New York. He received his undergraduate degree in physics from UC Berkeley and a PhD degree in applied physics from Columbia, performing research on experimental condensed matter physics, focusing on nanotechnology, thermoelectric transport, and graphene. After going through the inaugural program at the Data Incubator, I do believe Yury was in our first cohort ever. He landed a job at eBay and has continued a wide range of components of recommender systems stack, from machine learning, ranker, deep learning modeling, to offline data pipelines, to real-time serving infrastructure. And in 2020, Yury has focused on developing personalized recommendations using user embedding generated by a text-based deep learning model. So welcome, Yury. You truly are the OG of the Data Incubator. Next, I have Thien, and he is located, I believe, in Pittsburgh, right? He has his PhD in physics and is working as a clinical data scientist or machine learning engineer at the healthcare sector since he finished his fellowship at the Data Incubator. He now leads a data science team at clinical analytics department at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. It has 40 hospitals and 700 doctor offices and outpatient sites. He's mainly focused on patient care and machine learning models that bridge between physicians and patients. So welcome, Thane.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And last but certainly not least, we have William Bowser. I believe he's located in DC. Hard to know these days when everybody's remote, but he is an experienced data science leader and strategy expert with over 12 years of experience providing thought leadership and analytics experience in academia, research, and private industry. He is currently managing a team of data scientists at Freddie Mac, where he leads a portfolio of data-driven projects in the area of risk management. Prior to joining Freddie Mac, he served as the head of data strategy and analytics for Hello Tractor, which is an award ag tech company focused on delivering modern solutions to small-scale farm enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa. He spent his early career conducting quantitative research on market institutions and economic policy in emerging and developing economies such as Brazil, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Ghana, and Tanzania. So welcome, William. Thank you for joining us. Oh, and I forgot the last part. I'm sorry. You have so much to talk about. He earned his doctorate in applied economics from the University of Illinois and his bachelor's in agribusiness from Florida A&M. So I'm so sorry to cut that off, but welcome, William.
It's a pleasure.
All right, guys, so we've heard about what you're kind of doing, what you've been doing, what you're kind of doing now, but let's get into the nitty gritty. Tell us more about what your current role is and what it looks like to be a data scientist at your current company. I don't have a set order, so whoever wants to jump in first, feel free to go ahead.
I can jump out. I work in financial services at Freddie Mac, as Erika mentioned, and I also teach data science. Didn't mention that, but most of the work that I do, I would say, is around designing models and also testing some of the enterprise models, looking for weak points or different research ideas that need to be tested. We spent a lot of time updating. I don't know if anybody's been keeping track of all of the changes in the mortgage finance industry, but there's been a lot of rules to our capital rules. And so a lot of the analytics that my team works on is around developing models that help us better forecast the capital requirements to manage the risk in the credit portfolio.
Awesome. Thank you, William. Anybody else want to talk about what they're currently doing?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Yeah, my company does B2B insurance in the fintech realm. I would say the company overall is quite large, but I work on a kind of a smaller focused team that's trying to develop a data platform for insurance risk analysis. So we do a lot of, say, like automatic classification for different insurance codes, like what does a company do? A good amount of how do we handle, you know, web data and open data and integrate it into a useful platform for insurers, because insurers are actually our clients. And I guess I'll say we do kind of operate in this like often somewhat data limited realm where like we'll have either kind of very messy data or like data from insurers that's kind of you know, not standardized in any way. So yeah, I tend to work on approaches that either don't require a ton of labels or methods that we can sort of source them without having tons of manual labor.
Got it. Awesome. Yury, you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I can go next. So work at eBay. So we work on product recommendations. Essentially, all of our work is interacting. We interact with, well, the users interact with our products quite a bit. So anything we put out there, we see sort of an immediate impact. We run a lot of A/B tests. We're very sort of engineering and production heavy in the sense that when we build our models, we have to make sure they're fully scalable to 1.5 billion live items on the site and 180 million users. So it's we have a kind of a combined data science and engineering team. So some people are more on the data science front and doing more modeling. Some people are doing more engineering. Right now, we're working on personalization and using deep learning models to kind of generate recommendations. So that's very exciting, but it does take a lot of engineering consideration, working with some real-time pipelines now to generate some real-time embeddings for users. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thing, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Right now, with COVID, kind of our system kind of stressed. So we are kind of like, speeding up the modernization. So usually in healthcare sector, it's kind of like a little bit behind, like compared to eBay or other, Google or Facebook. But with COVID, we kind of like trying to modernize a lot of infrastructure. So I'm kind of working on those stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a big task with all that's going on. Great. Well, I kind of want to take it all the way back to the days where you guys were contemplating whether you wanted to join the data incubator. Can you talk us through that process for you personally? What made you decide to join the data incubator? Maybe how you found out about us. Like I said, Yuri, this was years ago, but any insight you guys can share about that? Because I think it's a big decision. So anything that helped you make that decision on your end would be great to share.
Maybe I'll go first since I was part of the first cohort. So I was kind of the guinea pig in terms of when the program was just starting out. We were the first bunch, and how to get kind of jobs and all that. I think, ultimately, this program was based in New York, and I was local here, and so I think that was what kind of drove me to it. And I think there was a lot of good exposure to the different companies and the skills that you get during the project building. And so I'm certainly happy because I got the job at eBay through it, and been there ever since, 6 years.
That's impressive. That's a long time to be at a company. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it seems like I realize now that my PhD seemed like forever at the time, right? But that was actually only 5.5. And so I realized I've now been at eBay longer than my PhD, which is sort of mind-boggling.
That's awesome. William, you want to share a little bit about your decision in joining the data incubator?
Definitely. So I was in the 2017 summer cohort, I believe, in Washington, D.C. And so a good friend of mine mentioned TDI to me as an opportunity to kind of get deeper into data science. I had been working in data science in a capacity at the time at Hello Tractor, and interestingly, during that time, just like now, I think I was the only economist around. And so coming from a background in economics and econometric modeling, and seeing the emerging trends in machine learning and data science, that really piqued my interest. And something that really appealed to me for the data incubator was, I think, the way that TDI positions itself to market towards graduate quant researchers or scholars, professionals, what have you, and to close that gap, right? That then, maybe you have 90% of the skills already, and maybe there's just a few things that you need to learn to get up to speed with what's going on in the industry. And so that really made a lot of sense to me for where I was coming out of academia and kind of the research space, and I wanted to move into industry. And so that was a really key factor for me. It paid off quite well. I was able to actually get placed at Freddie Mac, which was my first choice. That was where I wanted to land. I landed there with no problem, and it's just been a great experience since then. We actually hired from TDI. I think we pulled on my team, maybe there were 3 people from TDI at one point. So it's a great resource. I value, the skills that TDI forces you to develop, or gives you the opportunity to bridge, are really valuable in making a well-rounded data scientist and quantitative analyst.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the full circle when we have a alumni that gets hired at a company and then they stay there long enough and they come back and they hire from us themselves. I think that is so cool. So thank you. Isaac or Dean, do you guys have any thoughts here or want to share your kind of story of how you got to the data incubator?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add. I think my story coming like from academia to industry is somewhat similar. Like, I feel like data incubator is one of the few boot camps like targeted at those types of people, right? So, I had done some self-study, which I think is very important. Like, no matter how badass you are at your specific field, right? I think there's a certain minimum that I got to learn on my own. And then, the network and the projects of Data Incubator are really the key piece. I mean, yeah, it filled in a lot of gaps as well that of stuff I hadn't learned in the past. But I would say that, and like, the experience of being with a cohort, like I'm still friends with other people from TDI. Before that, I knew almost nobody in data science. So yeah, that's one of the nicest things about it.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you guys. I wanted to see if you could share a little bit about how the data incubator has maybe been instrumental, and we kind of talked on this a little bit, in your current role. Like, are there specific skills or tool sets that you have become familiar with or learned at the data incubator that you're still using today? And I guess it could be technical or non-technical. I know some people really gain value, as Isaac said, on those soft skills and making those connections, but anything that you carried with you from the data incubator to your current role.
In my case, as I mentioned, coming from the world of economics, I had done a lot of modeling prior to data incubator. So much like Isaac, combined with self-study, there were a few niche areas that I wanted to build capacity in. One of those was natural language processing. And also, I wanted to strengthen my skills in Python. I think up to that point, I had very introductory levels skills in Python. I have been using R for the most part, and prior to that, using Stata, which is social and for the social sciences, pretty much what they teach you in grad school. And so, learning and gaining proficiency in Python was a huge value add for me, building my confidence in working in Python, which I pretty much work exclusively in Python today. And then, as I mentioned, the natural language processing, just understanding different frameworks and approaches to building systems, helped me to build an NLP data product at Freddie Mac this past year. Or last year. That was quite well received throughout the company. And so those were the type of skills that I found very useful, that I used with very recently. Yeah, I mean, there are others. I think just the general exposure to certain best practices has also been helpful, especially as now, working with junior data scientists and people who are more entry level, being able to guide people into understanding how to set up their workflow. So very comprehensively, I think the data incubator has been impactful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else have anything to add to that, Yury?
Sure. So, it's been a while, and I'm sure the curriculum has changed. But I think one of the valuable skills is, kind of putting a project together, like a data science sort of end-to-end project, was definitely something helpful. I don't think that I've really done a kind of a larger scale project to that point. So I think that was good to sort of have that done and be able to kind of present that. That was certainly valuable. The skills, it's been a while, and I've certainly learned a lot there, and certainly learned a lot since then. And I think in general, on the skills front, I would urge people to just continue to study. Like, I'm studying now. I'm always studying, right? So you got to just kind of continue studying. So I would say, like, don't think you're gonna study for 6 weeks and you can just get a job and that's it. So you know, it's a great start, but keep on studying. And the other piece is the networking for the exposure to the different jobs and the markets and industries and the people. I think that's really kind of something that you can get in very few places. So that was really great because you get to go on a lot of different interviews and get exposure to different industries, and some that you kind of, maybe you don't even get those jobs, but you kind of say like, well, I've gone through that process and I don't want to go to that industry, for example. And so that's actually super valuable because it will sort of guide you as you're going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I always say that when you're interviewing companies, it's not just for you, it's also, or not just for the company, it's also for you. You need to figure out what you're looking for, and that interview process is the best way I found to do that. So, especially people that are coming out of academia that really don't know what they want to do, interviewing is the best to kind of figure out what industry or what kind of role they're looking for. So, does anybody else have anything to add on this?
Yeah, one of the most useful things for me was, every time I, walk into the interview, the thing people want to talk about are not my, thesis or, what did you do for a PhD? They all want to, would like to hear, like, what I did for TDI and stuff. And, because a lot of our projects are more kind of like, similar to what, you might have it in, when you work for the company or something like that. So these are like, conversation starter, especially for interview.
Yeah, so true. And, back to Yuri's point too, we still have students working on capstone projects, which is that, beginning to end project completion that does really serve as a portfolio piece for students to talk about in the interview process. So that's awesome. Guys, have you ever done like, what is it, Rose and Thorns? Like, do you guys have like your favorite part of the program, and then like one thing that you thought was really challenging part about the program? Does anybody have any of that they want to share about the program?
A thorn for me was MapReduce. That was
I think that's a thorn
for everybody. Yeah, and it's interesting because I was really excited to learn about distributed computing. That was another one of the key reasons why I wanted to come to TDI. And so, it was kind of a grueling experience to go through MapReduce, and a big relief to get to the world of Spark. And so that's one thorn that sticks out for me.
Anybody else? A lot of.
I can. Maybe I won't say a thorn. Maybe a thorn is that like it is tough in 8 weeks to really cover everything, and also like you get to know these people and instructors, and like in some ways it felt a bit short, but I mean I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, like I think at least when I was there, like the instructors were great, and that was definitely a rose. Yeah. But I felt like they really cared about, like, not to be like an ad, but like I'm serious. Like I felt like the instructors were very accessible, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, most of our instructors have gone through the program themselves, so they feel literally you're paying your thorns. They know the challenges, and I think they genuinely very much care about your success. So I'm glad that you had that same experience. A lot of people that apply to our program are wondering, how challenging is the program? Do you guys have any thoughts on this, especially now that you're kind of in industry? I know you've mentioned that it was it kind of prepared you for industry, but do you think, was there anything that, like, how challenging would you say it is? Do you think it's definitely doable? I mean, obviously you guys all graduated, but any advice or thoughts there that you could share with people that are currently applying now?
I guess I would say, 100% do it. Like, it's certainly challenging because I think what Isaac was saying is that it's just it's a very sort of compressed time frame to learn a lot of things and to do and to interview at the same time and to just kind of have your attention focused on learning and doing and networking at the same time. That's I think certainly a challenge. But I was in I guess I didn't really I was in semiconductors industry, and I was looking to switch to data science because it was getting pretty hot at the time. And so I'm not looking back. Like it is definitely worth it. I have a job now and there's so much opportunity out there. So I guess whatever the challenge, give it your best shot without question.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, Yuri. So, I mean, definitely it's an intensive program, it by design, and it's that's a lot of where the value comes from. Like it's a way to separate yourself from the pack. We're in a world where you can learn about data science from so many places, different ideas, but then when the rubber meets the road, I think the data incubator does a really great job of making you battle tested. I remember in our cohort, we would spend, I know I worked probably like 12-hour days on task, and we had a really good chemistry within our group. People would help each other. And so that builds, I think, practical experience for what data science teams are like in best case scenarios, I would say. But I can attest to the rigor of the data incubators program and curriculum. As I said, I hired from the data incubator because I knew, not to sound like an ad, but I mean, for other boot camps or programs that I know about, that you might know about, there's just something different about the data incubator that I think separates people from the pack.
Awesome. So I want to switch gears a little bit before we open it up to everybody. I know a couple of you have mentioned that you are now in a place where you manage a team and you've hired data scientists in the past. Obviously, some of the main goals of people going through our program is to get a job as a data scientist or in the data industry. If you've interviewed people, what are some advice, or what is something that you can give to them that helps a candidate stand out when you're interviewing for them? What are you looking for in candidates now when you're interviewing for a data scientist role?
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely going to be maybe team specific and specific to the task. But I mean, one of the things that I looked for was kind of deep understanding of what's going on underneath the hood of a lot of the APIs that are out, so that I can trust. I know I have some trust in a modelers or data scientists' choices as they build their workflow, and then also the ability to perform under pressure. The coding interviews are real. The whiteboard interview components are real, and it's largely a pressure test, just to see how quickly you can recall certain concepts, and how you maybe walk through a scenario that you may not be prepared for. So those are things that I know we look for outside of just specific things, but in general, those are what we look for.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any thoughts on the best way to prepare for coding challenges? I know in our program, we do those coding challenges every morning for that very reason, but I didn't know if there was anything else that you found helpful in preparing for those kind of on-site interviews where they put you on the spot.
Yeah, they're pretty awful. I'll be honest. I still don't like them, and maybe it's one of the reasons that I haven't switched jobs, because I don't want to go do that at Google. But it's there's a few things. One side note is that we've listed some pros. The cons are is super competitive, right? like the industry, and you're competing with you know, CS majors and you know, people who have been doing this kind of a very long time. So you do have to kind of step it up in that front. You know, the Cracking the Coding interview book is a classic. I'm sure you guys recommend that one. And then, you know, for me, being basically Lead Code is a great one, leadcode.com. And, you know, for me, like, I'm literally, you know, do like the top 100 problems and something like that. There's like HackerRank as well. But just go through them and, you know, like, you don't have to memorize the solution, but there's a few sets of patterns that you should be pretty comfortable with. And then you just gotta make sure get them down, because essentially for the coding interview, you gotta solve the problem with you know, maybe, you know, first approach and like a reasonable approach, like an n log n approach. And then you gotta write the style well as well. So, you know, it's you can be like, if you see the problem for the first time, that's gonna be tough.
Yeah, yeah. And even maybe not that exact problem, but something similar, so you at least know how to.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Isaac, do you have anything you guys want to add to?
We don't do code. We don't do coding.
You're like, we're not there yet.
We don't do coding interview because, you know, a lot of the stuff we kind of do make sure, you know, a lot of the thing we are looking for is like thinking, you know, we have a problem, you know, whether he can have the, like, you know, predicate thinking. We don't want someone to, you know, sit on a project like, you know, in academia, you can, you know, work on the, you know, one problem for like maybe 2-3 months. We don't want that, you know, we want more predicate approach, you know, more kind of like, you know, ship out, you know. Sometimes I have a bug in the code. I know that it won't hit it, you know, so you know, it's kind of like a lot of timing stuff, you know. In academia, you can polish the best and, you know, push it out. In, you know, predicate, or you have, you know, you have to balance out, you know. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of like more like looking for, you know, how people approach. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's one of the big reasons we started our program. Our founder, Michael Lee, was feeling that there's obviously a big difference in the timing approach and the execution of projects from an academia level to, you know, a private sector level. There is, you know, get this done for me by tomorrow or this week versus, hey, you have a couple months, maybe a couple years to work on this, right? And just kind of beefing up those skills so that you can do it in a more fast-paced environment, a more demanding environment.
I guess I'll just briefly say, I mean, the other folks here are more senior than me and have probably hired a lot more people than I have, but just in general, like, it's important to recognize, like, data science is such a broad field, right? Like, any specific company may be looking for totally different things, right? So you can't, Leak Code is amazing, and you kind of, at this point, we're at this place where you are kind of forced to get good at that skill. But then there's also this second phase, right? Like, can you design projects? Can you, you know, block diagram out a system, specifically in like more of the engineering side? And like, that part is also important. And like, depending on the company, they might really care, like, are you really good at this specific NLP stuff, right? And all of your hours on Leak Code might not matter. So I just don't forget about this other aspect of those, all I would say.
Yeah.
I'd like to echo that, Isaac, if I could. So like there's sorry, so I remember one of the interview questions I liked asking to candidates was like, what do you consider to be your specialty or your niche in data science? Because sometimes, you know, I mean, that can define and give you a sense of what you should be good at, right? And then, you know, so for example, like, so I'm a time series guy, right, from my econ days, and so you know, if someone tells me they're good at time series, then I'm gonna, you know, want you to demonstrate that you understand all the important concepts, versus if you tell me that you're a deep learning expert or you're strong in unsupervised learning, okay, so then, you know, that helps the target. So in many cases, in terms of finding that match, it's important to know who you are, right, and what you're interested in, what niche or area of data science that you want to specialize in or expand in. And it's okay, I think, when you find places where it's like, well, I want to do deep learning, and these guys only do NLP in a non-deep learning format, right? So I think that's also important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I wanted to say that, yeah, that sort of, I think, goes without saying that, you have to have that bar of coding, I guess. That's where I was going, but you absolutely need to focus on machine learning and data science. That is the core of what you're sort of selling yourself as. That's and again, I think what we haven't kind of touched on is that there's several different types of roles out there. There's data scientist, there's machine learning engineer. And I've actually, I started off as being more of a data scientist, and now I'm more of a, machine learning engineer, working more on systems, machine learning systems. So, it really, you have to look at the role and the company and how they use it. Because I guess if you're more of a, if the role is more of data science and pure modeling, the coding interviews might be slightly easier. That's what I've sort of seen, because you're sort of maybe building production code on a daily basis. But if you are building, sort of product, user-facing products in a production environment, then maybe the coding is pretty important for that job. So you have to kind of gauge that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Our program, we place people in data engineering roles and data scientist roles and data analyst roles. I mean, there is a wide variety of how companies and industries label these types of roles. Do you feel like we provide a good baseline, though, even if you want to go into data engineering, even though our, track is titled data scientist? It sounds like, it was a transition that you were able to make. Do you guys think we cover the baseline enough for you to kind of branch out to these different areas that you like or that you want to go to in that path?
I'd say that I left knowing enough about what to tell the data engineers that I need. So from the ETL process. So that's just my experience. And
I would say definitely maybe analyst, kind of older school data science and machine learning engineer, maybe a little bit more than data engineer, although now all these words get conflated. But yeah, there's some good baseline. If you understood everything at TDI well, you kind of have a sense for the landscape. I guess there is a lot of data engineering, very specific stuff that we don't go into heavily, but I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have done TDI, right?
Yeah.
I guess I can comment, it's been a while again, so I think the curriculum has changed. But, in general, I guess I wanted to say that, it's sort of, what the question I was asked at interviews is, have you written production code? And my answer was, I guess no, right? Because it's what I wasn't even quite sure what production code is, right? Essentially, it's working on a production system, and so if you don't have that, it's kind of tough to do that without the system. So that's going to be kind of tough to have that. But so I think maybe getting exposure to the Spark and the different technologies as best you can is really the kind of the best you can do. Otherwise, you just have to start getting experience somewhere.
Sure. And then you can kind of dive deeper and do that self-learning that you guys have all talked about. Because I do think that was a really good point that you brought up earlier, Yury, that this is an industry that's ever changing. So we are going to provide you very quick training in 8 weeks and hopefully all the tools that you need right now. But yeah, you blink and that's going to change. It's going to update. Technology is rapidly updating. So you always have to kind of keep on your toes and always want to be learning more. So. All right, guys, how do we feel about taking some questions from the audience? I have a couple ready for you. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so one of the first ones is, what have been the most exciting projects you've worked on? Whether this person didn't clarify, but I'm going to say within the program or outside of the program in your job or at other jobs you guys have had.
I can go. Yeah, so I think one of the first major projects at eBay that I worked on is a machine learning ranking model. Essentially, we're ranking our recommendations. And so I took a concept from search engines, this concept of dividing things into recall and ranking, and then applied that to recommendation system and build a point-wise machine learning ranking model, which is essentially building a binary classifier, you know, and the target was, you know, whether the item was purchased or not. Right, so it doesn't have to be, you know, super advanced. We had probably like a dozen features, you know, and you know, we got to put that into production. We actually published a paper about it in Rexis, the recommendation system conference, and yeah, that was awesome. And we got to put a Millennium Falcon on the front cover of that because it was an eBay item. So that was pretty, give me some street cred there.
That's cool. Anybody else have any cool projects they've worked on?
I think one project for me that was exciting, especially early on, it was one of my first projects. I built a fraud detection system for like internal use, like looking at different transactions coming out of the wire room, so looking at counterparty transactions. And so, you know, it was based on an unsupervised learning process. So a lot of the first problems I worked on in the industry were unsupervised learning problems, which I think tend to be some of the harder problems to work on. And so, you know, we built an application, a pretty simple UX application. So designing the back end and the front end was kind of a validating time for me to say, okay, I can, you know, I've finished TDI and gone into industry and completed an end-to-end project in real life.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, actually, this is not for work, but there's some like data science volunteer opportunities, which at some point I encourage people to look into, like Statistics Without Borders is one of them. But, you know, they had a need for like kind of more coding focused data scientists, and we basically built a service that scrapes the web for like COVID related news articles and like funding. And so we would crawl basically like all the Chamber of Commerce websites for every state, etc. And then we have some large pool of messy data, right? And then we used topic modeling and some unsupervised approaches to kind of whittle it down to some key categories that people needed, like, you know, what funding in a given state can we get COVID aid for? Yeah, and then so like this was an ongoing project, but we started out with kind of this basic approach and then, you know, added labels and supervised stuff later on. So it wasn't super fancy, but it was exciting to be like, okay, we could actually do some other stuff with data science.
Yeah, and public facing too, which is cool. So I'm getting a lot of questions about coding experience, whether like how, like your guys' thoughts on how much they need before they enter the program, you know, anything that you can do to prepare coding experience, what kind of coding experience you think you need for a job in data scientist. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about, we kind of hit on it a little bit, but it seems like it's a popular question.
Sure, I can start with the coding. You know, I didn't take my only coding class that I've taken was my AP computer science class in high school. You know, I wish I've taken more in school. And I tell people who are undergrads now, you know, at least take like one computer science class just to, you know, get your hands dirty a little bit. You know, I did some hardware programming in my graduate school in C++, and I worked with MATLAB. But otherwise it was, you know, it was pretty light. And so I had some experience. I guess I preferred that over statistics. And so I think I gravitated more to the sort of data science, you know, engineering heavy data science positions. And so I kind of like coding and I like doing that. So that was my experience. And, you know, like in general, I'm basically going through, you know, sort of a computer science curriculum, and I'm still going through it. You know, I'm getting close. I'm onto like the AI, like the reinforcement learning kind of classes now. So I feel like that's probably the last thing that I want to sort of tackle. But you know, I'm still learning, and you know, it's been 7 years.
Yeah, it's definitely a continuous learning process. I would say, I don't know, for me, I'm trying to remember what I put on my application. I think I might have put down like, I don't know, 5,000 to 7,000 hours of code. Keeping in mind that it was domain specific. So I was programming in Stata and R at the time, which is a very different framework from Python and C++, et cetera, Java, all those things. So I think it's important to be very comfortable writing the code, coding and understanding how to navigate different programming languages and pick them up. One thing that I would recommend is, if you know, that I found really useful that helped to accelerate my competency in programming is doing object-oriented programming as much as possible whenever you can for your workflow. Since I've kind of forced myself to do that, I've seen a lot of efficiency gains and just building frameworks that I think are transferable across languages and across different problems. And so that's I think one skill that for me was a game changer.
Awesome. Anybody else have any thoughts on coding? No. Okay.
I have another thought about, you know, just in general, like languages. I would try to stick, you know, learn 1 or 2 languages in depth rather than sort of knowing 5 at a very sort of surface level. And pick something, as William was saying, you know, that can do object oriented. So, you know, like what I would recommend, I mean, there's a Python R debate as always. You know, I'm definitely in the Python camp, but you know, something like C++. C++ is a bit tougher because it's very low level. But you know, yeah, there's Java. Scala is also super popular, but you know, those are kind of the, I would say, you know, solid industry languages.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from my perspective as a non-data scientist here, but works with all the hiring partners, that most of them are looking for Python these days, right? And so our program, the coding challenges we do are in Python for that very reason. There are some, depending on industries, that are still looking for, you know, that C++, but it's not too many these days. Most of them are looking for students that have Python capabilities.
Yeah, so here we look at for like SQL and Python. So most of our time, like maybe 60–70% of the time are on SQL. Maybe, you know, it depends on teams. Different team might have a different, you know, flavor.
Yeah. Somebody was asking, and this is kind of an easy transition, what tools are you guys using on a day-to-day basis that you can share with the students or the applicants, I should say?
Python for sure, right? Yeah. Python, SQL. I don't use R as much these days. That's pretty much it. I mean, for me, like it just depends on what you're doing. I am interested in Julia, but I don't use it at this point. But.
I'll mention kind of a little more specific. There's in NLP, there's transformers now, and there's a library called Hugging Face where they've done like a crap ton of work for you in terms of making language models easy to use. So that's of course important, but then like you want to do something slightly different, we need to know like PyTorch. I prefer that to TensorFlow, but you know, one or the other is very good. Yeah, and then like just the ability to like pick up tools, especially in the Python ecosystem where you need them, has been important, you know, because we don't have a ton of like infrastructure. We're somewhat smaller, so often for specific tasks we'll have to go out and pick the best tool for the job. Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
echo that. Just basically be able to work with open source code and is pretty important. So like chances are whatever you want to do is maybe already out there in a library and it's packaged. And so being able to just kind of install a library and work with it quickly is definitely a great skill to have. Yeah, I mean, as far as our workflows, yeah, I mean, Python, like scikit-learn for ML, we use PyTorch. Other folks use TensorFlow, but our team uses PyTorch, and we usually use this framework called PyTorch Lightning, which is just a sort of a training framework on top of that. And then, for the runtime applications, Java, Scala, get good at like using an IDE. So IntelliJ is a good PyCharm. The JetBrains frameworks are pretty good. So just kind of keep using those tools and iterating.
Awesome. Okay. Somebody's asking, what made you guys overall decide to go to data science? I know we talked a little bit about this in the beginning. What made you excited about data science? What made you even look at the data incubator and know about data science? Like, how did you find out about it?
Wow. I think for me, I started off maybe working on, I think I had a problem like that I wanted to work on. And at that time, I want to say maybe, yeah, I think it was a, like an unsupervised learning algorithm that, or a use case. And so I started researching different algorithms and learning about the evolution of modeling techniques. And so for me, that's what opened the door for me. So I guess you could say, like, there's that famous Venn diagram for data scientists where you have the software skills, the quant skills, and the domain or SME knowledge. And so I definitely come more from the quant side, doing like econometrics and mathematical modeling. And so for me, it was always about exploring the new methods. So I was very interested in the performance, the promises of improved performance over some of the traditional models that we had been using in our space. Actually, at the time, I had come across, there's this famous economist at, he was at Google for a while, actually, Hal Varian. And so he wrote a paper and had a presentation going around doing roadshows talking about what economists can learn from data scientists and what data scientists can learn from economists about different modeling frameworks. And so that was something that piqued my interest, to again, like, get exposure to the new and cutting edge ways of modeling data.
Yeah. Problem solving at its very best.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was, I was in, hardware. I was working in semiconductors up in IBM, and it's very tied to a specific location. So either kind of like upstate New York or Taiwan or Korea. So for me, I kind of like that, it's just in general kind of software and data science, you can kind of work in pretty much anywhere in the world. So I like the geographical distribution of that. And then I had one of my colleagues from grad school, she transitioned to data science like a year earlier, and she had a very similar background to me. So that kind of got me motivated to follow in those kind of footsteps. Yeah, so that was great. I mean, I think in general, sort of data science is, applying the scientific method to a business problem. And that's, I thought was great, because the other alternative you can do is something like consulting, which I didn't really, want to do, or maybe going to finance, which for physics, that's been sort of a potential pathway as well. But I thought, data science was a great path forward, and it definitely is.
Yeah, great, thank you. All right, guys, I have one last question. We are almost at the time. if you submitted a question and I didn't get to it, please know there were lots and lots of questions. So I'm so sorry. I tried to kind of lump some in that could answer a couple at a time. But a lot of people want to know, and I do too, what's one piece of advice you would give to yourself, you know, when you were thinking about applying to the data incubator before you had the careers that you have now? You know, what's one piece of advice that you would go back in time and tell yourself, or you would tell somebody else, you know, in a similar position? I know it's deep. I would tell myself to just order the pizza. That would be the advice I would give myself. But
I mean, I think I've said it before, but basically keep going, keep trying. You know, you're gonna get rejection interviews for sure, but just keep going, keep learning, keep trying, and you're gonna get there, like, without question.
Yeah,
awesome.
don't get discouraged by the rejection. You will get a lot, and you know, it is not because, you know, the industry is kind of like not ready to pick, you know, good data scientist. You know, it's kind of like, you know, sometimes, you know, people hire, but it's not that, you know, they couldn't qualify, you know, what they really want, you know. So sometimes, you know, you got rejection, but doesn't mean, you know, you're not good at, you know, that position, or, you know, don't get discouraged, you know. I took a lot of rejection before I get my first job. Now, you know, kind of like, as soon as you get first one in data science, you get a lot of offer. Yeah. Most of my friends only stay like one job for 2 years. That's it.
Yeah, I always say the first one's the hardest, and that's everything. That was for me too outside of college. You know, it's always a catch-22. They want, you need a first job, but then they want somebody that has experience. So, you know, you just gotta get that first job, and then the hardest part's over. Isaac, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think, like, find that thing that really drove you to want to do data science and excites you about it. And, you know, every time you're like, oh, I got a rejection, oh, it's too hard, like, you can remember that, and like that you're working towards something, right? Instead of like getting bogged down on this intermediate process, which is painful. It just is. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, panelists. I just so appreciate your time. It's a busy, chaotic world, and you guys chose to spend an hour here with us, giving us some insight and advice. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. You went through our program, and you lived to tell about it. So thank you for sharing it with us. To those that attended, I know Sierra put the link to the application. I saw a couple questions. I'm just going to go over it really quick. We are doing early admissions, as I mentioned. That closes on January 15th. One of the perks that we offer in our early admissions package is a free Python course. So we were talking a lot about having experience and exposure to Python. You get access to that with the early admissions package that we offer. So if you are interested in that, make sure you apply soon, today, by January 15th. Also, a couple questions about people having full-time jobs or not being able to commit to the full-time program. Yury, this is how far we've come. This spring cohort, we are doing a part-time program. This is very new for us, but I think it will help with those that have jobs currently or have families at home or just need a bit more flexibility there. So you can apply for the part-time program as well right now, and that deadline is January 15th as well. If there's any other questions you guys have that we didn't get a chance to get to, or you're personally wondering if this is a good fit for you, or you have some other questions, reach out to us at Admissions at the Data Incubator. We have enrollment counselors that can schedule a call with you and talk you through all of this stuff. We understand it's a big decision. We want to help you make that easier for you and more comfortable in that. So reach out to us, and hopefully we see all of you guys apply to our program. And once again, I just want to thank my panelists. Thank you guys so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful night.